Hello, guys. Today, my guest will be Reiner Knizia, and we are very thankful for the Muduko publisher who invite us to make this interview. So at the beginning, I have a question about your beginning and inspirations in board game. Your career in the board game industry is very impressive, but originally you started as a mathematic and finance. What made you to transition to full-time game designer?
I think I never really made a transition towards the games. I have always loved games. I've always played games, and because I grew up in a very small town, I ran out of games to play, so I designed them myself. And I was 8 years old, 10 years old. Of course, at that time, nobody set out to become a game designer. So I studied mathematics, as you said. I went into banking, into finance, into IT. And it became very successful from a career point of view. But the games also became very successful. One of the door openers was in the early 90s to win the German Game Prize with Modern Art, and that was opening the doors and was helping to get into the industry. So you're asking me about when did I make the transition to full-time. I remember that very well, because at that time I had a responsibility for a 300 people company in the UK with £2 billion of new business every year. So it was a big finance company. I loved the job, but on the other side, the games became more and more time-consuming and more and more successful. So I think it's important for some of maybe the spectators who think about taking career steps. So it says always, never give up your day job. So when I decided I cannot do both at the same time anymore, because I'm more the person who does one thing really good rather than 5 things half. I went to visit a friend in Spain for a week, and I very, very seriously considered whether I should give up my day job. I knew I would never be able to get back into management. You can't go out and make, oh, I designed games in the last 3 years, and now I want to go back into management. It's not working. So it was a very deliberate decision. I've never regretted it. And it was, I gave me that present to my 40th birthday.
Yes.
The job is nothing negative. Job can be, the profession can be very exciting. But in the end, you have only got one life. And you will always regret not having done or tried what is really in your heart. So I left the money and went for the heart. I'm not starving today, but it was the right decision. I found my place.
Yeah. What were the first game you designed before your professional debut, and did any of them make it to the market latest?
Yeah. The beginnings were in a way interesting, because that was a very different time, and I had very early designs which I made at the age of 10 or 12 maybe, which are little card games. One is called Digging, and that was the very first game which then was published of me in 1990, Digging with Hexagames, a little card game. And I initially didn't only do physical games for the boxes. I, for a while in the beginning, ran a play-by-mail magazine. There was no emails, so it's really you send postcards and write down your things. And so I designed a number of games for that magazine, which I ran. I did a few handmade samples of some of the games I did, not trying to become a publisher. So there are lots of games which I merely designed to play with friends. And in a way, they were quirky and not really suitable for general publication. But 1 or 2 or 3 of the early days made it. And also, when I seriously then went into that was before professionalism, but seriously went into it, I also found a publisher, a Munich publisher who published a book of mine, which had a lot of these creations, lots of new creations in there, which you could play with standard cards and dice and paper and pencil and so on. So a lot of these initial ideas found its way into the book.
Well, the next part, I want to ask you about the designing process of the board game. So, what does your game design looks like? Do you start from the mechanics or a theme or a specific inspiration you're looking for?
That's an important question. The nice thing about our industry is that people come into the industry through the love of games. And they come from all, I call them colorful birds. They come from all different directions with all different backgrounds, and therefore they all bring something new to the games. For me, the inspiration was always the theme. As a child, I was fascinated by car racing, so I couldn't find a game about cars. So I built one about cars, and then the cars also went through these little tubes, and I measured statistically, mathematician, how far it went and so on. So I had a lot of different ways how I wanted to realize these games, and it wasn't always easy, but essentially what drove me was always a theme. So I want to have a game about this. And then I developed the mechanism, I researched about it, I found kind of elements, how I can put them into the game. And that was how I started. But when you become a professional and you do quite a number of games, the aspiration and the inspiration and the motivation is to do something new. And I had a very deep insight, which is very trivial once I say it, but the insight was very deep. I said, if I start with something new, I have the best opportunity to come out with something new. So game design is an art, not a science. I'm a scientist, but game design, I do not try to trample along the same path. It's not a repeatable process. It's a new challenge. Start somewhere new and force yourself to go somewhere else. So now it is not a theme, it is not the mechanics, it's not a particularly something. It is always looking for a new entry point, looking for a new challenge, looking for something. I say, oh, here I have the little core of something new, of something which can be something innovative, and then build the game around it. So it's find something new, see something new, get a new challenge. And we'll probably come back to that later with respect to some examples also, yes.
Yeah, I think also it's a good point, because we as the gamers always, when we take a game, we're looking for something new, something that will excite us, surprise us in mechanics. So I see it in people when talking with them about games, that they're looking always something new, something interesting in a game that they have. No one really like that. I have 10 same games that do things the same, but this is about space. This is about knights or something like that. Yeah, many of your games are future elegant and simple mechanics, but with deep strategy layer. How do you achieve this balance between?
As I said, I am a scientist. So I'm more the person who tries to reduce the rules into some fundamental principles. There is the opposite side, which are the storytellers who make lots of redundancies, lots of details, lots of little rules, lots of texts, and so on. This is not quite my style. So I'm more the scientist reducing redundancy and bringing it down to principles. So with this respect, you will hardly find extremely long games in my game, long rules in my games. It's more bringing it down to the core. But I see, and maybe that hits your answer better, your question better. I see the games more as a platform where I try to engage people. So I want to give the people the freedom to bring their personality into the game. And therefore, when you play with different people, you get kind of a different challenge and a different gameplay. And I think that makes a certain kind of depth, because it's not just the game which gives you the challenge, but also the other player who has enough freedom in the game. I don't like games where you have to administer lots of things and you have to handle lots of stuff. No, I want to take that out. I want to let you take your turn and focus on what you want to do. Of course, that's easily said. It's kind of the style of my thinking, and all of this, or lots of this, comes through playtesting. Yes. And that's where the style gets shaped, because I say, okay, there are different ways to go, so let's try this and try this. So it then forms into what is my preferences, yes. And so I have my style, and so people know my style, and that's what I want to create. I want to create games with simple rules, but which give you enough challenge so that you want to play it again, but without overburdening you with a 3-hour game where it blows your head. Yes, that's not my target group. There are players who like that, but that's not really my core target group.
I know you have a lots of games and lots of prototypes of your games. How many projects do you usually work in the same time?
Yes, I'm mad. Before the pandemic, I had 50 drawers. Every drawer in the studio has one game idea or one game in development in there. In the pandemic, I couldn't test for a long time. So I bought another 50 drawers. So now the studio has 100 drawers. Now, no sane person and no mad person like me can work on 100 games at the same time. So almost all the drawers are full. But I'm not proud of filling the drawers. I want to empty the drawers, because then I have a finished game. And having an idea in the drawer and making initial research is easy, is fun. Then comes the work, the energy, the time to really develop it into a complete game. And that, as I say, takes a lot of playtesting. Playtesting is the heart of game design. I am a mathematician. I cannot calculate fun. Fun has to be experienced, yes? And so we playtest regularly, 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a week with different groups. Session is usually 4 hours. And this is not only one game, that there's several games played. So with this respect, it's playing the games, then working on the games again, and having the pressure. Tomorrow, the next group will come. Make sure that you get this changed. And so it's positive pressure to get going. But realistically, it's about 6, 7, 8, 9, sometimes 10 games, which are on the go. The good thing, so what are the other 9? T. Yes. The good thing is, one of the challenges or one of the pitfalls of designing of art is that you fall in love with a design. And it's a failed design. And it's a sunk cost fallacy. I've invested so much, it has to work. And you invest and invest. This is the advantage of having more drawers, because suddenly I see a drawer and say, oh, I haven't looked at that drawer for half a year. What's in this drawer? And so always those games and those developments, those drawers, and I move them around and so on, will come to the foreground, which are most exciting. Oh, this worked well. I will change this. I want to see how it works tomorrow. Yes. And so I think this is a very good, natural, and painless evolution and selection process to always get the most potential games to the front. Eventually, sometimes, and I mark them with colors, some of them get a black mark, which is very bad. Which means, look at this, if it's really flying, or do you want to empty the drawer and put them aside? Yes.
I sometimes test games for some publishers, and I want to ask about something, because I hear like that on events you can test the player experience, but in house, when you have a more a specific group of testers, then you can test mechanics or how the game works. Do you agree with that sentence?
We only test in the studio, in a closed environment.
Yes.
For me, the public testing wouldn't work because these are games which are still confidential. They are in development. Sometimes the board and things show very clearly what's going on. I cannot afford that somebody takes a picture in the best intentions, puts it on the internet and so on. So it's in the closed circle. We have a quiet, so it's no real background. We can concentrate on it. And sometimes we will talk and discuss more than we play, because I'm a blood sucker. I suck with the blood and the inspiration from all my play testers. Yes, they get the credits for that, but I ask them hard questions. Sometimes I'm just a moderator and say, okay, so what's this and why is this wrong and why? So I have had 7 ideas for cards. Why can't you come up with 1 8th idea? It's easy because the first 7 are easy. Yes? But so it is really taking a focused, there's lots of chocolates and lots of nuts and so on there, but it's a really focused people when they come. It's not a social meeting. Of course, we are friends, but it is really focusing on the game design. And you're quite right. The first step is in my mind. So over the years, I got the experience. When I have a new idea, I sit there, I close my eyes, I sit here, and there's the other player, there's the other player, and then I say, okay, what do I feel when I play my turn, and what do I feel when the others play their turn? And so a lot of things, I essentially play the game in my head. Sometimes I write up the rules before I've even played it for the first time with people. And when I go to prototype, so when we go to testing, my games always work perfectly in my mind. And then comes the moment of truth. And sometimes you're lucky and things come through as you imagine, and sometimes they completely fall apart. Sometimes they fall apart in a way that it gets even better, and sometimes you just have to say, okay, I could have gone an afternoon or a day to the beach rather than thinking and closing my eyes, but what do I prefer? I still prefer thinking about the games. Yes. So it's a selection process. Not everything flies. And the sooner you know, the better. And this is a big challenge. When do you go to prototype? Because if you don't invest enough time in the beginning, the prototype will not give us feasibility information if that works or not. If you fall in love with this and research and spend days over days of thinking everything out, then you play it for the first time and say, oh, nothing, lots of wasted. So when do you go?
What brings you the most satisfaction in the game design process?
It is essentially the initial phase. It's the phase of thinking of something new, exploring it, having complete freedom.
Yeah, that's why I say you almost answered that question, because I see it on your face when you're talking about this imagination in head, and when you close the eyes, I see this.
And then it's the point, if the game gets stuck, it's not that much fun, though it goes down in the order of the drawers. But if a game really rolls and you come into the final phases, you know, I have a great, in my judgment, I have a great game. And then it's just doing the nuances, and you see that the playtesters are all enthusiastic. Of course, that's a lot of fun, and that's very rewarding here. So it feels great. Whereas if you say, oh, I'm stuck and this still doesn't work, and I've changed it, it still doesn't work, it's not that much fun, but it's part of the design process. Yes, so it's still design.
Not always will be good. But...
Yes.
Okay, so now I want to ask you about your classic games and favorite projects. At the beginning, you talk about the modern art. This is the one of the game from the Licitation trilogy. I see some that kind of title about this game. This is the part of the trilogy games. And this game is considered as a best auction game. What inspired you to create this unique auction mechanics?
I'm actually not quite aware about the trilogy.
Yeah, I think I saw this on BGG, that the Reiner auction trilogy.
Okay.
And the Tigris and Euphrates also be the part of, they put it as a note, this is the part of trilogy.
Tigris and Euphrates in modern art. Okay. You see, this is an
The
interesting
modern
point.
art, Ra, and the third one I forget.
Okay, Ra is yes, that's a good point. These are auction games, very different auction games, yes. But the interesting point is that I very much developed the games independently, and later people look at it and say, okay, this is part of this trilogy, and this is part of this phase, and this is this tile laying phase. This is fine. It's not delivered in my head, yes. But so you asked me about modern art. There was no specific intention behind it. Modern art fascinated me because of the world of artwork, the exhibitions. You see that. Why do some pieces of art, some paintings get so famous, and why are others? So why do I like this one? Why do I like this one? And this one is famous, and this one is not famous. Yes, so. This fascination, and I thought, okay, so there are several aspects which I wanted to kind of reflect. And that was, there are people who collect, there are people who trade, and if you put the games into the galleries and you put them out, the artist will become more famous, more seen, you promote him, but then maybe you don't have the painting anymore because you put it on the market. So this dilemma I wanted to reflect. And then in the course of the playtesting, more and more of different auction mechanisms came into the game. Of course, auction theory is a part of mathematics. It's very deep mathematics, but there are some interesting mechanisms there. I try to take some simple ones, but keep the game varied enough. So apart from this simulation of collecting, marketing, promoting, hindering maybe other players to get through with their favorite artists, promoting artists, I then put the mechanism behind it of saying I want to have a big variety of different auctions, because that puts the players on the spot. That's again the platform I talked about. That puts the players on the spot. Sometimes I have to name a price. Sometimes I auction differently. Sometimes we make a simultaneous bidding action. And so you're always kind of on the edge of what shall I do? It's not repetitive. I don't like repetitive games. And certainly in modern art, you can't call it repetitive. So, but I just took 5 different auction mechanisms, which in playtesting worked out. And I was lucky that the game then became very successful. Maybe I should say something about Ra. I'm very proud of Ra, even though I shouldn't say that, but I am very proud of Ra because Ra is also an auction game. But what fascinates me about Ra, and it happened accidentally, it wasn't deliberate, but in hindsight, in analysis, what happened is actually that you have these sons from the sun god, and they have different powers from very strong to very weak. And you start with some, and then you try to build the Egyptian civilization. So if there is good civilization tiles, I would put a strong sun in. And if there is not much, I would not bid much or low one. But what you get when you win an auction is not just the tiles for your civilization, which you build up over 3 rounds, but you also get the sun of the previous auction. And therefore, you have to decide whether you go for good tiles or for strong bidding power in the next round. And this is fascinating because it doesn't make the game calculable and linear. I just said, okay, I can calculate roughly the value of it. That's a sun of value 7, but not a sun of value 9. But now everything changes because if there is the highest sun in there, some people even bid for that sun without having a single tile in there because they, I don't need anything now. I will just be the most powerful one the next round. And this makes it non-linear, and people have very different attitudes how to go with this. And so you bid not only for value, but also for future power.
Okay, I really don't have occasion to play Ra, but you inspired me to try this game.
Okay.
Talking about this mechanics, because I don't remember. Do I have occasion to play a similar thing? when I win the auction and I win something from previews that will change my future game, especially and yeah, it's quite interesting game twist. Another question is from about the Tiger and Euphrates. Its most brilliant strategy game. Did you anticipate that it would become such a classic?
It is very hard in the beginning to see where a game goes. And these are developments out of the 90s. So these are my classic games. I didn't have the experience, I didn't have the market overview, but I think in the 90s I really hit the spirit of the time with some of the classics. And I mean, Tigris and Euphrates is also a very special game to me because for a number of years it was number one on the board game geek list, number one for years. It's a different type of game. Today other games are at the very top. But Tigris, I remember how I designed it, that I had this idea of kingdoms appearing and disappearing. And I I read several books before I actually did the design about Mesopotamia and how the different kingdoms, how the different city-states came up, and then they come up and they fall. And I wanted to put this into the game. And then I had this inspiration to say, there were rivaling parties in the cities. And what I then said is, no, you as a player do not own a city and rule a city, but there are different roles. There's a king, there's somebody who is relevant for the army, there is somebody relevant for the whole agriculture side, and so there are different leaders. And you can have the king in one kingdom, and I can have the minister for agriculture, I mean, different name at that time, in there. And we have common interests, but we have also conflicting interests. And we can build monuments, but different leaders do different contributions and get different benefits. And therefore, we may keep the kingdom in place, but you may want to kick me out as the king, or I might want to kick you out as the king. So I try to take over the king, and the king, it's all the power is derived from religion. So if I get more religious support in placing the tiles around me, then you have to leave and I'll be the new king. That is the internal conflict, you know, the intrigues. But then also there were the wars, the conflicts between the cities, and then they come together, and then you look on which side is a stronger leader, and the weaker leader goes with all his entourage, and you make quite a number of points for that. And so I think the real novelty is here that sometimes we are rivals and sometimes we are in the same kingdom and in the same boat. Same interests, different interests, and with multiple players, the alliances are completely different everywhere, yes? So that's, for me, fascinating because it makes a deep gameplay. Again, it's the platform. Everybody sees, oh, you're my enemy there, you're my enemy there, you're my friend there, oh, but here, and so on. And it's no negotiation, it's just you go on. And then at the end, there is the trick that if you want to have a successful civilization, it's not just that you want to stand up in one thing. If you are strong in religion, but your people starve, no good. And so you have 4 dimensions of the civilization, and you need to develop them all to the same level. And your weakest level will count, because if you don't have enough food, the big temples don't help you, yes? And if you have a tyrant as a king with low scores, then it doesn't matter if you have enough food, because people will be unhappy. So you want to have these 4 dimensions at the same time. And if you're already high in one dimension, then in one of the forces, then you say, okay, I could get 7 more of these, but I've already got them coming out there. And I can only get 1 of the green ones, but on green I'm shortest. Maybe I just take the 1. Non-linear. I can have 7, but they're not as valuable as the 1 to me, you know? That comes there as well. Sorry, I'm going into details, but I'm trying to give kind of the process of novelty and what I'm trying to build in to make the deep gameplay with relatively simple rules. The rule is very simple. You have 4 dimensions, 4 colors, and you count your little cubes, which are your points in the colors, and the one where you have the fewest, that's your result. And so if you have 20 red ones and 5 green ones, you can get another 10 red ones. You may be happy, but it doesn't help you. If you get another 1 green one, it helps you. Very simple, but in the gameplay, it's very dilemma.
Yeah, no, don't worry, because it's a pleasure for me to seeing how you explain your games. It's very impressive for me. And as you know, because you tell me about the games from 90s. Lots of these games today it's very hard to buy and try to play it. But as you see now, there are lots of reimplementation of same game. Is there any game you wish to make it again in a modernized board game as a trend today?
Yeah. And as you alluded to, my design period now created 800 games. Yes, there are 800 different games in more than 2,500 editions, different language editions on the market. I have 1 copy of each of them. It's a big, big library. So some of the games had their time. And when I look at them today and play them and say, okay, they are no longer in the spirit on what people want today. And so I let them rest. And I say, okay, I don't have to force them again. They had their time, they're good, fine. And then there are some which I refer to classics, which go back quite a long time. Digging was republished recently, yes. So, and then we are trying to bring them back to the market. And what is very important for me when we bring these games back, and Tigris and Euphrates is coming back soon, and some others, Samurai, Taj Mahal, these games from the 90s, they come back. And what is, as I say, what is very important for me is that the games, first of all, stay in their original form, because people who know it from the community, the old games, I don't want the confusion in the community that suddenly everything changes. On the other hand, the new publisher says, can we do something extra? And that means we sometimes have an expansion, we have maybe a back of the board, which gives a different play. So we'll add something to it, we'll add new modules to it, which gives also those people who had the old version maybe the temptation to try out the new one. But I do not want to rework. I don't see a need for reworking. If I need to redesign the game, I think it should become a new game and the old game should just rest. But if the old game stands enough, then we can build around it and make it even more tempting to try it out again.
So you better see it like a way to republish the game, but the core game stay the same. Yeah. We can change arts to create it more beautiful than in old times, and sometimes you accept some expansion, but expansion which will works also to the old players with old version of game.
Expansions means it expands the original game. So, I mean, sometimes we tweak 1 or 2 little things where I say, oh, that's not very elegant how we use the tiebreaker or so. So there may be some little adaptations, but the basic game stays in place. And there are great opportunities today with the market changing to really bring these games back. And as you say, not everybody can buy these days. So it's a great, I'm very, very happy about these opportunities.
Yes. Another questions I have for you is based on the mathematics and how it is the parts of your creation style. Many of your games are built on deep mathematical foundation. How important the mathematics is in a great game design?
Okay. I see that you have a second page. This is all fine. You also said people don't want to listen more longer than an hour.
Oh,
So what I do is, no, it's all fine. And I'm saying this very publicly. So I'm trying to give a few short answers so that when we come to some of the powerful questions, I still have the time for that, because we don't want anybody to be bored here. So we will be faster now. So mathematics.
I see. I'm not boring. I don't know how they.
No, but nobody can listen for
it's,
longer than an hour. So,
no.
I'll say you something. He interviewed me for more than 3 hours. If the interview is shorter than 3 hours, he cut all the nice things out. Yes, it's his fault then. Anyway, so now back to reality. Forgive me, but
No problem.
it has to be fun. Games are fun. Games are fun. They're not mathematics. So with this respect, the short answer is mathematics is not important for the games. Mathematics helps me because this is my kind of entry point a little bit into the world. I see the world as a mathematician. If you're a painter, you see the world differently. We perceive the world differently. And therefore, I'm also looking at games differently. And of course, mathematics is model building, has lots of backgrounds. We talked about auction theory. There are lots of things in there. And even so, I'm not calculating things. Of course, I have maybe a deeper understanding of probabilities and statistics. And so intuitively, that flows into the games. And that certainly helps me. A painter, an artist with paintings, will therefore have more an understanding of the topology of the board and so on. So it's different approaches, gives different results. So in short, mathematics is not at all important for games. It's important for me to design.
I have a tricky question.
Always good.
Do you think games need to be perfectly balanced, or in some degree of randoms are necessary for enjoyment?
For me, balanced and randomness is not counterparts. When we talk about pure logical games without luck involved, then I think the games need to be balanced. If you play chess and you know that there is a winning strategy for white, then the game is not interesting. I'm lying, because a mathematical sentence actually says game with finite moves and complete strategy has always got a perfect strategy. So either white can always win or black can always win, or it's always a tie. But it's so complex that nobody can yet.
Yeah,
work
my
it
friend told me that when we talking about the game balance, he told me that the checks aren't a great balance because white wins 53% of match.
But I think the point here is very few of our games are pure strategy game which have no luck or no randomness involved. And for me, this part of luck, this part of randomness, this part of statistics is very important for the game. So the winner can say, I played better, and the loser can say, I was unlucky. But the point here is randomness does not mean unbalanced. It just means that you are you cannot control everything. You need to adjust to how the game develops, how situations happen, how I get the cards played, how I draw the tiles, or what happens. So it's not just in my hands, it's not just in your hands, it's also in the hands of the game. But that means sometimes I can be a bit lucky and I have an advantage. Sometimes you have lucky and advantage. But if we play 100,000 times, then we are roughly equal, not evil, roughly even, and then the game is balanced. Yes. So with this respect, yes, it is right that chess is almost balanced, but not quite. But I think if it's a 53 to 47, the balance is perfect, because if a random part is in there, it will just be covered by the random.
You have lots of years of experience in a board game world. How has the world of board game changed since you first started your career?
That's the right question. Do we have another hour? No, I'll make it short. if you go back a long time, when I started designing as a hobby and so on, um, when I went to university, that was the first year when computers were introduced. I was the first semester which took computer science courses. Yes, so there was no internet, there was no email, so there was no digital world, and therefore all the information we take for granted uh, was not there. So when I said I grew up in a small town, there I didn't find the games. There wasn't an internet, there wasn't anything to go to. When I went to Essen, when Essen started, you know, the big fair in Germany, the big consumer fair for games, now 200,000 visitors every year. Um, the world exploded. Suddenly you see all the publishers and suddenly you get all this information. So it was much more isolated, and the markets at that time were really quite local. So you had a German market, you had an American market, you had the different markets. I was traveling at that time in the 90s and later, and you see that the games are different. When I compared it initially, in America, they didn't know the Euro games, what they later called Euro games. They had their games which were very much driven by theme. So, for example, Dungeons and Dragons. They played it over and over again, the same game, but in many different versions. And therefore, copying the mechanism was absolutely okay because it's different theme. Whereas if you went to Europe, particularly Germany, copying the mechanism was copying the game. Yes, so because there the mechanism counted more. And this was very diverse and very also disjoint because this interchange, the information flow wasn't there, and the whole industry structure was different. Then came the digital world with the information flow, but then also came the globalization. And therefore, if you look at globalization, of course, now every there is no publisher, or hardly any publisher, who really serves the whole market directly themselves. Most of the publishers have local markets, but they have a very wide network of partner publishers. And so they say, we have a game, and then they invite all the partner publishers and say, look, do you want to join, and they make localizations. So that spreads the games much more, though the Euro games were brought to America. Now they are no longer Euro games because they're everywhere. And so digitalization helped globalization, and it also helped, which I think has a very big influence at the moment, is crowdfunding. So Kickstarter, or wherever you want to go, GameFound. This gives completely new opportunities to for new players. I mean, players, I mean publishers. So for new entrants, people into the market of games. And it also reaches completely different people, and it reaches them with very different products. I very much benefit from crowdfunding with my republications, which we discussed, because that allows to do a deluxe version with nice wooden pieces and with extra modules if we republish a classic game. And so this is a big opportunity for the classics in my eyes. And of course, the digital games, which then came as digital games as well, was a big windfall for me as well, because suddenly you have a game and you don't need to do anything, but you get a digital license, and it's quite nice earnings on the side. Yes. So.
When you're talking about this deluxe versions, and I see in my head when they announced that the Castle of the Burgundy will be created by Awakens, and they will create a new, bigger version, and I hear lots of people saying, "Who will buy it?" And now we have finished the second reprint of this game, and I have occasion to play it in new design, and yeah, it's I see it like people now buying games by eyes. And when we have a great, beautiful game, it's much easier to sell them something a classic. So
Yes, I mean, there are advantages and disadvantages, because it all with some of the initial Kickstarter or crowdfundings, it kind of went over the top. People just put nice figures and nice things in front of it. Everybody said, I love the components, but there was no game behind it. And then after you've sold it, what's the motivation to really work for the publisher, work on the game? So you sometimes got a less impressive game with respect to gameplay, and that's what you want to experience, but you had nice pieces. You can put them in your living room and you can look at the pieces and say, wonderful, but is that what you really wanted? So there's
want to buy
always
a game, but you have only beautiful.
yeah. So this is the other side. I mean, very right now to talk about really challenges. Globalization is not just an advantage. We saw it through the pandemic when the supply chain suddenly broke down, and the price for containers from China, where lots of games are produced, suddenly got tenfold. And how do you afford it? And now, very up to date with the new taxes, suddenly you have crowdfunders in America who said, we have offered it as crowdfunding, we have sold it, now we need to produce and deliver it. Now we need to, with all the trade wars going on, now we need to, in our own country, pay import taxes, and suddenly all our profit and everything is gone because we need to deliver, and the taxes eat about everything, yes? So the world currently is a madhouse, and I think that's also, which I need to add to how does the market develop. It's games are a reflection in the mirror of our times. The games market as well. And if you look at the madness in our world, it also affects our games, unfortunately.
Current trends include legacy games, storytelling, and digital hybrid games with mobile apps.
Mhm.
Do you find this development interesting?
Of course, it's interesting. I mean, we're looking for new trends, we're looking for new developments, and you mentioned some of them. It's important that the time the world moves on. I think we can only keep our industry alive if we have new products. And new products, you know, when I ask people, so what becomes the next bestseller, they all have their theories, but nobody knows. Marketing people can always explain it in hindsight. This is a bestseller because this. And then you look forward and say, now explain how the next one is. They have no clue. So this is the how trends happen accidentally. But some of the trends come through, and as you say, legacy came through. Initially, it was what I shall turn up tear up the card. I'm not going to do this. Yeah. So it's a rethinking, but it was luck. I mean, you make your own luck. That means you need to have a good design, and then you need the luck that it comes through and is really recognized by the world. For example, I find them interesting, and some of them I would have liked to invent myself of these trends, but you can't do them all because there are many brilliant designers out there. But what I have looked at is, when you say, do I find it interesting? What I've looked at is most of the initial legacy games were very complex, very expensive. So I said, why? I look more at the wider public. I don't do these 3 hours and big thing. I do them as well, but that's not my main focus, as said. So I looked at legacy and said, can I not do a form of legacy which plays in half an hour each? You play many games and the game changes every time. Plays in half an hour, you have no downtime. And so I wanted to open the world of legacy games to a wider public, and that's how I created my city and then my island, where you really play in half an hour with very simple rules and it evolves. So yes, it was very interesting. And the second thing I could do is at least add a new aspect to this type. Storytelling is a point where this isn't quite in line with what I'm doing with simple rules and deep gameplay. Storytelling is more lots of details, lots of redundancy coming in, like doing a work of fiction. So this is not my main line, But what I'm currently doing is look at some of the great stories of the world, great epics, and see if I cannot transform them into a story in the game that reflects a story. Yes. Digital, was your third point. Digital, I think, has in the meantime a long story of its own developments with the hype of the mobile games. Yes, we have all these stores, the app stores where you can buy the apps, but everybody can put something in there, but you need to be seen. Yes, so this is the enormity of the digital world, that you can have so many projects and products, and how can you actually see yourself in the project. Hybrid is an interesting part because that links the physical world with the digital world. And there have initially been lots of very primitive tries and disappointing tries of saying, okay, we make an app and we make a game with an app and so on. But I think after the initial high-flying, low quality, things crashed again, and then it was built up in a very good manner, I think, where we have now very powerful games. My strongest selling game is a hybrid game. It's Who Was It? It's the game where you sit with this digital box, which is a treasure chest, and you are in a castle, and you speak to the animals, and they want to be fed with the right things, and then you give you hints, and you want to try to find the thief. And you sit there, you play together. There's the ghost who plays against you. There's this software which plays against you, and you get heartbeat if you want to do it. And some people, you wouldn't believe it, some people gang up and cheat the game just so that they win. And they sit there, all the conspirators are on the table, and cheat the electronic and just make a wrong thing. I'm there, and the electronic cannot see that you're not there, and they cheat so that they win. Can you believe that? But if they have fun, the electronic will forgive them. Until the AI comes, and then it will remember everything.
As you say, you have a lots of games in your collection, and the games you work on it. Do you think the board game market is overstarted with new releases? What makes a game stand out into the industry? Because I see, like, as a person who deliver news about the new games, I see how much games we publish in a year, and sometimes can't figure out how those games are selling.
We have a lot of new games, and of course, the trade always says, "What's new? What's new?" Yes, so apart from re-releases and so on, what is new? I think for the general public, it does make very little difference if you have 500 or 2,000 novelties. It's just too many. But this is the market, and I don't think we want to complain about the richness, and the different publishers find their different niches. And we talked about Kickstarters, very, very expensive products and so on. So it's different market segments there. I think still the consumer is relatively lost. And sometimes if the consumer just goes maybe online and buys the cheapest or the most reduced game, it's not always the best choice. Sometimes when you go into a store and say, look, I like this one and this one, then a good salesperson would know, okay, then I have two others which are similar and you might like them as well. So you need some orientation for the general consumer, for the general player, for the family. Prizes, awards or reviews make a good guidance. So I think that's very important. Second part, how do we stand out? Yes, very good. Whenever I talk to publishers, they say, there's so many novelties, give us something that stands out. We want only to publish games which stand out. Every publisher only wants to publish games that stand out. So we are here, now we all stand out, and it's the same level again. So it is difficult. And many of my games get rejected from the publishers with the statement, this game is perfectly designed, it is well balanced, it was a lot of fun to play, but how does it stand out from the crowd? So and I understand that. this is difficult. You can essentially, in the end, only try to pick your best things and then hope that you make. I can only do my best job. Then I can try to pick a publisher and publisher pick me, where I believe they can do a really good job for that game, for this type of game. And then when we both have done our best job, then we can only hope that we have a bit of luck and that the thing flies. I mean, we did the little card game Llama, and Llama was originally published here in Poland, but Llama suddenly got nominated for the Game of the Year, and it just took off. And you never know. I mean, it's not a bad game, but it just, that hits the one. And when I talk to the different publishers, so how do you develop a brand? And I talked about this before a bit. And they say, well, we don't know. We take 10 games, we throw them up, and the one that flies the highest, we develop into a brand. I didn't explicitly say that, because of course to stand out is if you have a brand, if you have a well-known family of games, then of course you can build on that and you can sell more games and brands. What's an orientation for people? A brand is a very good orientation. If I know, oh, that's a one good game, now there's a second game, there's a dice game, there's a card game of this brand, then that helps a lot. So brand building in this time is extremely important. Yes. That's why I talked about brands.
Do you often play your games after they are published? Or do you prefer to move on to the new projects?
Short answer to the first part, no. But you have many of, I have to admit, many of the games which were published, I have never played in the published form. This may be shocking, but the point here is I've played it a lot of times throughout testing. We go through a testing cycle and a development cycle of, if we're very lucky, 6 months, usually a year, sometimes much longer than a year. Not just on one game, I said, working parallel on different games. And when the game then the game goes into licensing. And if we are lucky, the first publisher takes it. If we're unlucky, the publisher looks at it for 3 months and then says no, and then says no, and then the third or fourth publisher takes it. That's a year maybe gone, and then the publisher takes a year. So sometimes games come out, fresh new games, which I have completed at least one, but usually longer than 1 year ago. So I'm completely somewhere else already. Yes. So this bloody old stuff which is coming out to the market, I've done that a long time ago. Yes. So with this respect, I'm somewhere else. And just taking the game and playing it with the new form, I don't have the time for it, and it doesn't really give me a lot. If the publisher wants to change significant things, we would test it at that stage. Yes? So then I'm still involved. But once we have agreed everything, we have seen the graphics, I see everything in the process, I approve everything in the process. So then I'm somewhere else. And I would only come back if I talk about republication, so the classics, or if I talk about building a family, brands. One game is very successful, publisher comes and says, can we not do a sister game? Can we not do a second game? Then, of course, I would go very intensively in it. But my shortage is playtest time. I need lots of playtesting, and there's so many drawers shouting, I want to be tested. So whenever I get people, victims around the table, we test the new designs. There's no time to play anything else.
I'm not surprised your answer, because I have occasion talk with few developers in Poland, and they always tell me that I played this game, but the final product I still have it closed in my closet or something like that, because they remember they told me jokes that probably I wouldn't be able to explain you the game I'm design, because I remember the first revision, and I probably will mess some rules that we finally decide to left.
This is a very good point. When people always tell me exactly the same thing, but you design it, you should know the rules. And I say, no, for me, it's much harder you know only one set of rules. We have played multiple sets of variations, and how do I now remember which one was the final best one? Yes, that's exactly what you said.
Yeah, I have a same situation a few weeks ago. We play one of the game. I play tested, and you simple to explain us this game. No, I played the three different version of this game. How I can explain you? We need to read the book. Are there any game designers who work particularly admire?
It comes a bit back to the same situation. I very, very rarely play other people's games. One aspect I noted that is the time and always the enthusiasm and the drive. This is the design I'm working on, and there is an on in the drawer I want to try out. So never enough time for that. But there is also another reason. The mind is a very strange thing. If you have to find a solution and you don't know a solution, you will come up, how do I build a bridge over the... As soon as I say bridge, you already have a solution because you know it. How do I build a bridge over the... You already see in your face, in your mind, how do I build a bridge over the river? Everybody has a picture. If you hadn't got this picture, your bridge would completely look differently. And this is exactly the many decisions you take about how do I break this tie, how do I distribute this one, how do I resolve the auction. If you have a solution from somebody else in mind, it's very hard to be creative and do your own one. So I make it easy for me. I don't know the other solutions. I have to come up with my own. The playtesters, they, behind my back, play many other games. And that's important because then they can say, oh, you get too close to this one. I didn't know, but it doesn't help when you publish it. You can't say, I didn't know. You have to know. So the playtesters will stop me. So with this respect, I can't really judge and can't really say this is a works which I really much admire. My old friend, Alex Randolph, who passed away quite some years ago now, I admire very much because nowadays we have lots of game designers and essentially the doors are all open. He lived in a time where the doors were not open, where he had to fight for getting names onto the cover, being recognized. And he developed games in much former times where the markets were much more difficult to approach, where there were much fewer players, and he really established himself as one of the core initial modern game designers. And I remember him, he was always playful. He never lost his playfulness. He was always fascinated by, he had a carpenter where he lived in Italy, and he did something. Sometimes the children came around, and then he played with the children. So it was, he never gave up being a child. But he was a very serious designer as well. And so if you want a name, Alex Randolph.
I think all people asking, how long do you plan to continue designing games? Is this a lifelong passion, or do you ever consider retirement?
Well, I just gave you the little present tin with 40 years of Knizia games. So professionally, not full-time, but professionally, I've been doing this with publications 40 years ago. I started. Of course, I have done that my whole life. Games are my life. I'm not going to retire from my life. The only way to retire from games is death, because you don't retire from what is your life and what is the contents and what you love to do. Why should I give it up? So if the universe lets me, I do another 40 years. If I can, I do another 80 years. We'll see. But this is what I love to do, and I will continue to do that as long as I can. And as long as I stay relevant. Staying relevant means you need to still be able to create things which are relevant for the people and people want to play. I have built an organization around me so that I have this time, because not to be not humble. I mean, I'm very grateful about the success, but you want to also be careful not to become the victim in a way of your success, because we are signing more than 100 license agreements every year. It's not all new games, but republications, other language editions, and so on. That means 100 contract negotiations, 100 approval of games, 100 reading of the rules, but not all, because some languages I can't read. So there's a lot of operational side, there's lots of marketing, there's lots of licensing side. And so I cannot do that anymore myself, because otherwise I would have no time for designing. And I want to maximize the time for what I can do best, and that's still designing games. So I have a team of three wonderful ladies around me who are all here, who really help me and contribute much to building the business and freeing me up to still keep going with the design.
But I think this is the good place to finish our interview with this beautiful statement from your side about designing, and that the games are your life and you will not retirement your life. So very thank you for your time, and that was really a pleasure to hear all your stories you tell me today. Hopefully the people also have the same. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and I send my best regards to all the players and all the fans in Poland and all over the world. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeśli chcesz być na bieżąco z grami planszowymi, zajrzyj na naszego Facebooka, YouTube'a, stronę www.planszoweniusy.pl. Czekają tam na Ciebie recenzje, nowinki i inspiracje. Podoba Ci się to, co robimy? Wesprzyj nas na Patronite i pomóż nam tworzyć więcej, bo z nami wiesz, co jest grane.